Welcome to Infotainment Talk Radio, sponsored by Infotainment.com, with your hosts, Doug and Joel. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back. Listen to me. This is our first episode. It is Infotainment Talk Radio. I am Joel, sitting with Doug. How you doing today, Doug? Good to see you, bud.
Doing great.
Awesome. Well, this is a great venture you guys are doing here, sponsored by Infotainment.com. And I will say real quick, I think it's super important to point out that everything we talk about is related to the infotainment system in vehicles basically from 2000 and up. Is really where they started working with factory radio upgrades. And Infotainment.com is our sponsor, and they are definitely the industry leader in plug-and-play factory radio upgrades, navigation radio upgrades. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto retrofit kits are available for pretty much 15 and up type of vehicles, the big three. So we thank those guys over there. And you, of course, are a big car fan yourself, Doug. I know that you've got a lot of domain experience, and this first episode, we're really going to concentrate on kind of the history of infotainment. You know, when people think about it, the first thing that was in your car, that was alternative, was a radio.
Yep,
absolutely. Know? And so why don't we get into a little bit of what we're going to cover today? I think that would be important. We'll set the bed a little bit, set the table, as it were.
Sure.
So we're going to do a little bit of the history of infotainment in general. So those very first automobiles putting radios in the cars, kind of how that worked. We're going to get into a little bit of learning about the first navigation radios in vehicles and kind of where that all spawned from. And then we're going to do a deep dive into Infotainment.com history, Infotainment.com's history.
Absolutely.
So, and then we'll kind of close out, this being our very first episode of Infotainment Talk Radio. We do want to create a culture and a community where you can ask questions. So within subsequent episodes, we'll be releasing, all of our contact information. I think we're going to have an email, infotainmenttalkradio@infotainment.com, and we'll have a telephone number so you can leave questions on the voicemail. And ultimately, when we get a little bit further down the line, we'll potentially be doing some of this live and have some great live callers and things like that. So, first episode of Infotainment.com. New podcast is Infotainment Talk Radio. And, of course, what did you think about what was the first car that you had? We'll go off script here for a second. What was the first car you owned, Doug?
The first one I had was a 1994 Eagle Talon TSI.
Oh, dang.
Yes.
So what did that have in it? A 94. Okay.
Yeah.
Probably had a pretty good radio, I'd imagine.
Well, it was the only reason why I bought it was obviously because it was a turbo, and it was my very first car, which was dangerous. But as far as the radio is concerned, I think it had just a basic cassette. Didn't have CD.
Okay.
But, being young and your first car, the first thing you want to do is rip that radio out. You want to put that new radio.
Get that Alpine in the 90s. Those are big.
Alpine, JVC, Sony. And of course, you have to put subwoofers in it and an amplifier.
Yeah, it was a whole big deal. And you had to cut and splice and do a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It was not easy.
What was great about those radios back in those days is everything ran on 12 volts. So... it wasn't as complicated as it is nowadays, but still a lot of fun.
Yeah. My first car, I had a Ford Futura. And of course, I had I don't think I even had a CD or tape deck or anything in that thing. It was just straight
A-track?
up AM, FM. Yeah, right. Yeah, the 8-track was in the trunk. You had to
exactly.
open and walk around. But it is fascinating to think, that, and I got my first car in the 80s, late 80s, I guess, but it was a hand-me-down. But it is fascinating to think, that here you go today, somebody getting their first car, and it's going to have all these glorious safety features, all these things that, even just 20 years ago, we didn't have. So it's cool to see the rapid growth of infotainment systems in vehicles. And that's what I thought would be cool about this first episode is really learning about the whole setup that are in vehicles. We pulled a couple of Wikipedia articles, which we'll get into. But I thought, looking at the very first radio in a car, They invented the automobile in 1920, right? The 20s. So it was in the that same year, well, Model T, I guess let's say the teens, so the 1900s. And then in the 20s, it was Galvin Manufacturing Company, known as Motorola today, that introduced a Motorola 5T71 radio, that commercial car radios really started to become very popular. So, in fact, that name Motorola is a combination of the words motor and Victrola. I never really knew that, but
put those two together.
Yeah, but I mean, when they've got a radio in a car, they weren't even doing programming for people in automobiles yet, right? Because people would listen to the radio in their home.
Yes,
a lot.
Yeah. I did notice from that Wikipedia article, the radio receiver that they put in, they sold for $130, but
really?
The Ford Model A, which was expensive at the time, cost $540. So. Wow. Could you imagine spending that kind of money?
When was that? In early 1900s?
The 1930s.
Okay, but still $500.
Yep.
That's not even...
Well, the Ford Model A itself, the whole car was $540.
Yeah. Oh, wow, I guess you're right.
Yep.
And you don't even think about that. So the equivalent amount, if you want a radio, Rockefeller was the only one driving around with a radio. And then what could he even hear? I guess a lot of the stuff kind of came from war times. You almost got to think, the radio communications, the navigation type of stuff. So, back then, having a radio in your car, I wonder what you could even pick up on. Right, there are very few choices.
Yeah, very few, very low quality in audio, I'm assuming. But, instead of sitting in a car doing nothing, you might as well put the radio on, right?
Going on a long drive.
Yep.
Uncomfortably long drive in those cars.
Yep.
They all had those rumble seats in the back where the engines were in the front in some of those first Model A's, right?
Oh, yeah.
They were, and they were all front wheel kind of drive. They hadn't even perfected any, knowledge of drivetrain or comfortability or no seat belts.
Yep. No seat belts.
Nobody,
exactly.
Yeah, no seat belts. Nobody ever thought, that whole auto industry would really grow into the huge monolithic industry that it is today.
Unbelievable.
Billions and billions of dollars are representative of people that love their cars, take care of their cars, spend a lot of money on their cars, and upfit their cars. And, in learning a little bit more about infotainment.com, I've had the personal experience of, being able to work with people where they will say, I love this car, but I hate this radio.
Yep.
I love this car, but I hate this radio. And so a lot of the times when people discover infotainment.com, they'll see that there's plug-and-play factory radio upgrades there to better systems than they currently have.
Exactly.
Yeah. So... so in saying all of that, we're moving along through a little bit of the history of infotainment systems. And, it wasn't really up until probably another 20, 30, 40 years that they even started to think about putting navigation systems in vehicles, right?
Yeah. 90s, I think, in the 90s, they had a lot of...
They maybe thought about it in the 60s, 70s.
Oh, yeah. But it was even really prevalent, the U.S. government, in 1973 kind of started, doing their research. And, by 95, it was fully operational where people could really take advantage of it. GPS, that is. And, at that time, even in 95, you're talking about, the old Garmin street pilots that you'd carry around and stuff like that you could put on.
They were still external, but would be something you could see in the vehicle.
Exactly, it would be something you put up on your dash typically, and that's kind of the Garmin Street Pilot was really in 1998 the really first successful run on the GPS system.
So they had to have, I guess, and people don't think about it, they had to have satellites in the sky first,
absolutely.
Right? You've got to have those set for all the global positioning systems that would eventually be out there. So going to the moon in the 60s, the kind of the first paving the road for those satellites to kind of go up. And then, they would move into even more and more sophisticated systems. I'm trying to find on my end, my little sheet here. So you've got it right there. And I'm just recalling, was it Toyota that came up with some of the first systems in vehicles. I know that we've got written down here about Carphone, which we'll get into in a little bit, but
yeah. So obviously they came out with the 8-track, then they moved into cassettes, and then once they kind of what was it in the 80s, they introduced a CD player, the world's first car CD player in '84. Pioneer actually was the first to do it. Absolutely. And then the first factory installed CD player was the '87 Town Car.
What?
That was the first.
Do they make that anymore?
Town Car, they do not. No, they got rid of the Town Car. But I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we especially take for granted today with everything that we have. And what would you say that year was? 80 something for CD players?
Yeah.
Oh, and CDs weren't even that big, were they? They were just kind of starting to come. The tape deck was where it was at.
Yep.
And before that, the infamous 8-track.
Yep.
8 tracks. That then did not last long for whatever reason.
Yeah, the CD players, I mean, if you think about it, really in the 90s, when Napster was around and people were creating their own CDs and ripping them and things like that, really in the 90s, you could say that, CDs really kind of took off, and they obviously started tapering off in the 2000s, but still interesting nevertheless.
Yeah, and kind of to go back to where we were a little bit, now I've got my stuff up here. There's a cool blog post that really kind of lays out the history of, and it's at that ndrive.com website. Mm-hmm. It's a brief history of GPS in car navigation. And they start out there, and they're talking 1930. Now, we were just talking about a radio in the 20s. So these guys in the 30s, what is this? Designed and created in the 1930s, it's more like a map guidance tool. And if you see this image, I know we're just all audio, but you see this image, it looks like an old school little kids game or something almost, like where you're moving the map. So the thing kind of churns and moves over on a continuous reel.
Maps.
Paper maps, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the very first attempt in 1930s, and you see it in this image kind of right there where the current day infotainment system is, right there to the right of the speedometer. And what is that called? The Inertial. The Inertial. This device came with a set of paper maps. They were wrapped on one roll to another across a display, and a cable connected to the speedometer controlled the scroll rate. The speed with which the display moved was proportional to the speed of the car, so it's always showed the correct point. Brilliant, right, for back then.
Yeah, for
brilliant.
1930,
yeah.
Man.
The big problem was that the moment you drifted from your route, you would have to load a new map and find the same exact spot of your current location.
Exactly.
So it was already rife with problems. The next one that they bring up, if you got it up there, it was some 50 years later that they came out. They tried again. They got something legitimate out in the market. Who did that?
That was an 81 Honda.
Yeah, look at that. 81 with electro gyro cater navigation unit. That just sounds really crazy. And again, it looks like the paper map is what they were using there. But
that's interesting.
The display is much more elegant. Introduced in Japan in 1981. Inertial navigation system used a small helium gas gyroscope, and it was more like the systems used by fighter pilots in the Cold War, which is interesting. So inertial navigation systems are based on a pretty simple principle. If you know where you started, you know how far you've traveled. And if you know which direction you were headed in, then it should not be difficult to know where you are. Apply that concept continuously, and you've got the workings of a basic navigational system.
Yep. So
in saying that, a lot of people today, they have problems getting around even without their phone.
Yeah.
So imagine a world where everyone, has got kind of the mind of a pilot, So in 1981, fortunately, Honda came out and said, here, we got this great idea, kind of borrowed from the Cold War. So what are the rest of the unit was optional for the equivalent of about $2,750.
That's about a quarter of what the cars cost.
Yeah, exactly. And so we keep seeing this disproportionate or equal kind of pricing based on the automobile and the nav system or the infotainment system. So that's pretty interesting. And then it says nearly 25% of the price of actual cars themselves, as we just kind of went over there. Are you looking at the same page I am?
Yep.
Oh, you want to take that next one? How do you say that? ETAC?
ETAC.
Okay. Yep. So let's learn about that a little.
The first move from paper maps to digital stored portable media was an aftermarket system called the ETAC in 1985. So just a few years after that first one. Yeah. Or rather the Honda one. That's this one here. So pretty cool. It's mapping data stored on a cassette drive, and each tape would cover a section of a city.
It's crazy.
Navigating around L.A. required four tapes.
Jeez. That is crazy. But that is kind of the incubator of where we're at today, right?
Yep, absolutely. So what they did is after that, it looks like the 87 Toyota went to a CD-ROM navigation system.
Yeah, this is where things get moving.
Yep. So that was the first thing they did.
Toyota?
Yep, the Toyota 90 or 87.
We'll have to post up this particular blog because these dash systems are amazing to look at.
Yeah. I mean, you would think, how futuristic does that look?
Yeah, it really does look great.
Yeah.
I mean,
87.
Comparable to what's going on today. I mean, the speedometer looks digital, and that map data has color.
Yep, it does have color. That's a good point.
87 Toyota CD-ROM nav system. So, 1987, Japan gave the automotive world two less known but important advantage in navigation technology. The Japan-only Toyota Crown Royal Saloon G was the first with an in-dash CD-ROM Dead Reckoning navigation system. Now, let's talk about that Dead Reckoning. Because from what I understand, and maybe you understand this better, you're definitely a little more engineering, kind of put together. But as we look up and give you an idea of Dead Reckoning as a principle in navigation, I'll read this out to you. In navigation, dead reckoning is the process of calculating one's current position by using a previously determined position or fix, and advancing that position based on known or estimated speeds or elapsed time and course.
Interesting.
So that kind of today, as far as infotainment.com goes, I think they put together a VSS harness over there, which in essence is pulling from the vehicle speed.
The vehicle speed.
And it relays back into that nav radio and some later model GMs and Chevys.
Yep. Absolutely. So moving on from the 87 Toyota, which used the CD-ROM, I think that was really the first one that used a CD. They moved to the 1990 Mazda.
They're phasing out of the CDs now, right?
Oh,
DVD, those things are gone by the wayside now. Yeah.
Yep.
So the Mazda.
Mazda 1990. First ever GPS system for automotive navigational use. So maybe those other ones were more or less concepts.
Well, or they were probably highly used in like military or even maybe commercial airlines and things like that.
Sure. Built into the actual car, for the first time your position on the road could be triangulated in real time from satellites in space. So 1990.
And Mazda was the first one.
Yep.
They say truly the space age had finally arrived in automobiles. And then you alluded to this earlier about mid-90s, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Comes along. Here comes GM.
Yep. And GM's Guidestar. So that was like a pod. And in fact, as a little kid, I remember seeing one of these before.
Yeah.
There was a whole rat's nest of wiring that was involved in hooking this up in the vehicle, but it was like a pod on a long arm.
Interesting.
Drilled into the side of the car.
Oh, like kind of like one of these microphone arms almost?
Exactly.
Like
and
gooseneck or something?
I remember that. And but it said it was initially introduced in 92 on Avis rent-a-car vehicles in Florida.
Oh. Wow, what a coincidence.
Yeah.
We are in Florida.
Yeah, we are in Florida.
Wait, let me get my GPS.
Yep.
Are we in Florida? Yes, yes, we are in Florida.
But even then, it was only turn-by-turn guidance. It wasn't an actual map, and they only had limited maps. So it wasn't like you could plug it in and drive
anywhere.
Yeah,
it was just limited. Okay, but see, I'm looking at that image there, and it's showing you the right turn coming up in 0.1 mile.
Yep.
So that is indicative of what's going on today, and I like it. It's called Guidestar. It's OnStar today. Later became OnStar, I guess. So, yeah, that's super interesting. And have you ever run across anybody with you ever see any of these, specifically, the stuff from the 90s? People still have that in their car. Do you think that they still support these systems, the automakers?
No way. I would
They're like,
imagine.
you're just on your own.
Well, yeah, Guidestar, I'm assuming that's General Motors. Maybe they owned it at the time?
First wave
must be.
For them.
And like you said, maybe that is what transitioned into OnStar. It's something to look into.
Yeah, and that's cool. They say the mapping cartridges were then available down the line for a wider area. Yep. And that makes me think of the dang Atari games with the little different cartridges and stuff like that. So it's almost like that same kind of technology. Okay, so we're kind of moving through this list really good. What's up next?
Up next, in 97, a few years later, the Alpine came out with a pop-out CD-ROM stored map navigation system, which used GPS satellites. So each disc contained mapping for a few different states. It would allow retrofitting, similar to an aftermarket system itself. But 97, you could put a single DIN aftermarket navigation by Alpine, and the screen would fold out and pop up.
So, yeah, people talk about that DIN. That's like a good reference to a unit of measure for car stereos.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. So single DIN used to be for the longest time, a lot of vehicles used single DIN, then it was DIN and a half, double DIN, so 2 DIN. So
yeah, double DIN, you still are out there, and still very valid radios.
Yeah, very, very much so. You don't see a lot of single DINs anymore, which are only maybe 3 inches tall, something like that, 3.5, something like that. It's
crazy. They went small and then went big.
Yep. So taking a step after that, that's when Garmin Street Pilot. Now, the Street Pilot was very successful for Garmin. People picked those up like crazy.
Yeah.
The price was right around $550. Yeah, people would get them for Christmas and, give them around. And I remember my uncle up in Buffalo, New York, had one of those in his GMC Jimmy. He had it up on top of his dash. And he thought he was really cool because he had it.
Well, those are cool, though. I mean, I would agree. But those little units, as this image shows, that's the antenna was affixed to the little unit there, right?
Yep, absolutely. And, those also use cartridges as well. But yeah, really anyone could buy a GPS navigation system once that was released.
Yeah, it says here at the bottom of that that the U.S. government deliberately limited the GPS functionality, and it wasn't until 2000 that the full capabilities of GPS technology were installed into commercial vehicles.
Exactly.
With new luxury vehicles like BMW 7 Series laying the claim on this technology.
Yep. So 95, the government kind of made it fully operational, and once that hit, then companies were like, wow, we can see a lot of profit from this. We'll develop something.
Yeah.
And that's really when, the Garmin system came out, just a few years after that.
Yeah, because those satellites, like we were talking about, were really all government. There wasn't a lot of, commercial stuff up in the skies or anything, or allowed for commercial use, as it were.
Absolutely.
So it is interesting to see as that kind of they pulled back a little bit on that. And there you go. We get it rolled out to the general public. And now today it's a commonplace thing. And most people are using their phone, which is a little navigation engine. We're talking about all this gear. But I guess that's a good segue to kind of the end of this article. And again, we'll give props over to ndrive.com for putting this blog post together, which is what we've been talking about here on the first episode of Infotainment Talk Radio in studio here in Oviedo. I am Joel, over there, Doug, and our sponsor, of course, Infotainment.com, the industry leader in plug-and-play factory radio navigation upgrades. Oh, so let's button up that. What does that say? Oh, yeah, that's where we were going. Since then, GPS technology has advanced by leaps and bounds, with many drivers now relying on smartphones for precise traffic and directions. Okay, so we got through all of that, and what we were going to talk about a little bit more before we go into the history of Infotainment.com as an organization would be this next one over here, which most people don't think about. You know, we take advantage of, we got the cell phone. Well, the first audio, there's vehicle audio, right? And on this link to these articles, vehicle audio is equipment installed in a car, vehicle, or other vehicle, to provide in-car entertainment and information for vehicle occupants. Until the 1950s, it was consisted of a simple AM radio. Additions since then include FM, 8-track, cassette players, CD players, DVD players, Blu-ray players, navigation systems, Bluetooth, telephone integration, and smartphone controllers like CarPlay and Android Auto. Once controlled from the dashboard with a few buttons, they can now be controlled by steering wheel and voice commands. So I brought this up because I thought that whole history of this is just fascinating, you know, and we kind of go back to that talk about Motorola a little bit. But it's the audio in the vehicle. Where are we? It'd be right here. A car phone is a mobile radio telephone specifically designed and fitted into an automobile. The service originated with Bell Systems and was the first used in St. Louis on June 17, 1946.
1946.
So we're talking about cell phones in cars or car audio, right? And it kind of extends into that. Yeah, and I know Infotainment, our sponsor, is a huge proponent of the safety feature of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto.
Absolutely.
You know, we don't look at people who get these little, even though they're cool and it makes sense, you get these little arms that kind of hold your phone and cradle your phone in a safe view where you can see it. Now, that is not Apple CarPlay.
No,
that is that is your phone in a cradle.
I think the idea behind Apple CarPlay and Android Auto is to have your phone completely hidden away and to be able to do everything through the infotainment system.
Yeah.
And then also, as it mentions, steering wheel controls.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can initiate your voice recognition via the device now. So, hey Siri, go, map a course to here or bring up this contact. And it's just the smartest way. I mean, down the line, you've got a lot of experience with infotainment systems in general. Is it all going to be convertible like that? I mean, are cars going to be kind of like these bikes that they have around Orlando that anybody can take?
It may well be, It's interesting as far as I think the way that it's going is there's going to be several apps available right through your infotainment system. They're all going to have their own IP address. They'll be able to be connected, and you wouldn't even have to have your phone necessarily. Or your phone, I think the wave of the future is your phone will actually be the key to the vehicle. Once it senses the phone is in the vehicle, it'll start up. And,
I think you're right.
I think they're going to get.
There's going to be a lot more interplay between your device and your automobile.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that's definitely where they're going. Okay, cool. So, did you ever have one of those big phones? Those big chunky?
I did not. My dad did.
Yeah.
It must have been in the 90s. I think he worked at NASA, and a lot of the guys over there were really into that technology. And I remember he had one in his Toyota Supra. It was a 92 Supra.
Those Supras are bad. Yeah. They're tough cars.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
But he thought he was cool carrying it around, even though it was the size of a brick. And
it is crazy.
It was, like $1 a minute
when you
or
see,
something.
ridiculous on the rates.
Oh, yeah.
Those were just horrible.
But Motorola, I remember it was a Motorola.
Yeah.
And, it was interesting.
Yeah, so I think as we go along, what we're going to do definitely with our efforts here on the podcast, we're going to get a little bit more into people's questions, your concerns, about what you're looking to do, because there are a number of people that may have a system that's not compatible with a more current infotainment system.
Absolutely.
And so there's a lot of people out there, they're really do-it-yourselfers, and they want to find a way that they can, take this older system and put in a newer system without going aftermarket.
Absolutely.
The only choices really for them right now are aftermarket stuff, but they really want to stay factory.
Yep.
So in saying all of that, you would know, and some of the R&D with infotainment, have they ever looked at that? Is that too tough of a task to retrofit stuff that's, maybe a double din?
No, not necessarily. You know, I think that's kind of us to our core, is finding solutions where there isn't not a solution, right? So doing the R&D, not only for the customer, that specific customer, but a lot of people. So if someone comes to us and says, hey, I have a Nissan Rogue, and I'd love to be able to put a factory upgrade in it. Yeah. Is it possible? Well, it's not possible, but let's do some R&D. Let's figure out if it is possible. And, 9 times out of 10 it is. And, we get started with the R&D.
Yeah, and a lot of it, because infotainment prides themselves on the plug-and-play aspect of a lot of these upgrades, that it's super easy to, have a wire harness set of, things that will help these people, go from one configuration to another.
Absolutely.
And so let's get into talking about infotainment. Let's get into a little history of infotainment. Over a decade old company.
Yep.
Back in 2008, I think it was, Infotainment was born.
October 2008.
That's awesome. Well, definitely happy birthday. And
we just celebrated 10 years.
That's great.
10 years.
That's wonderful. Wait, do I have applause? No, I'm not going to. I can't control the effect. All right. So let's talk a little bit about how did infotainment start out?
So infotainment was spawned off, starting in 1998. My father started a car business, Buffalo Auto Brokers. And basically what we did is we would go to auctions and purchase vehicles, clean them up, and then flip them, And what we did is we sold them on eBay. So we were one of the first car companies to actually market a vehicle on eBay. Wow. And so we did that. We took a lot of videos of these vehicles, which YouTube was just really getting started there in the late 90s. And, we would post videos of these cars so people on eBay who could be in the middle of Wisconsin, nowhere near us, can be confident enough to buy a vehicle on the internet. And
that was futuristic 10 years ago. Yeah, there's companies now that have that as their, buy it online and we'll bring it to you.
Exactly. So we did that, and, we specialized, I would say, more or less in minivans. We sold a lot of minivans, and but what ended up happening was, there were a lot of people that, kind of start catching on to it, and so we had to do some cool stuff to it to differentiate ourselves from our competitors, right? So we started the research then to what can we do, So, the Town and Countries and the Grand Caravans, the Chrysler products, you could put a drop-down DVD. They came from the factory with a drop-down DVD, which was unheard of. I mean, you have a minivan, you have kids, why not have a drop-down DVD system? So all factory. So
the screen and the where the DVD was held or played all came out of the...
Right out of the roof, and it was a factory option. They released that in the late 90s, and we figured out, we're like, oh my gosh, wouldn't that be cool if we can put that in these vans?
Yeah, it would.
And you're hitting your target market because these parents love DVD players.
Yeah, they're like, whatever shuts those kids up.
Exactly.
Back there.
So we would pop these DVD players in almost every van we had, and they were selling like wildfire. So, as time progressed, we slowly tried to figure out how do we get a navigation system in here, and it was really with those minivans that we figured that out. So it was probably 06, 07-ish. Yeah. The market kind of tanked, and, we were going into a recession, and we did have a lot of knowledge about, drop-down DVDs and factory radios and stuff like that. So,
well, it probably couldn't have been better timing, because then people are in the mode of like, I got to keep this vehicle longer. I've got to make the most of this. I can't get a new one.
So we started out really with FCA, Chrysler, which includes Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Right. And we would sell these little kits called lockpicks. Okay. There's a company down in Melbourne, Florida, that sold these little kits to allow you to do cool stuff to your radio while the vehicle's driving. You know, not very safe back in the day, but that's kind of the roots of it. And, again, we took a video that showed exactly what this product did, and we marketed it on eBay, and we sold a lot of them. And we get customers that would call and say, yeah, this is real cool, but what about a camera? What about this?
Yeah.
What about the radio itself? Can you guys sell us a radio? Well, we can't, but let's look into it and we'll call you back. So, the customers kind of told us what to do.
Yeah, no pun intended, but they drove drove you into the radio side of it, and you said, let's look closer at this. And
that was in 07, 08,
Wow.
So we founded it, and the legal name, OEM Auto Parts, was created in October 08.
And that's great. And now, today, coming up to present day, that effort is now representative of 3 different organizations.
Oh, absolutely.
Infotainment.com, navrepair.com, and obdgenie.com, in case people are familiar with those names. Nav Repair focuses on programming and repairing factory navigation units. And OBD Genie, I will say, is a pretty innovative company. I think that company was probably first to the market with the concept of this portable OBD programmer.
It's a programmer. So a lot of the stuff that the dealer does when you bring your car in for service, or if you want to have an accessory installed, they actually have to flash the vehicle using their scan tool.
Yeah.
And, we take it for granted here in Orlando. I mean, you can hit a golf ball and hit a dealership from where we're located, but you're in the middle of the mountains and you need to go, you want to get something installed in your vehicle. If there's a company there that...
And the dealer's hundreds of miles away or something.
The dealer's an hour and a half away, which a lot of our customers are. They'll be more than happy to buy a programmer that they can get shipped right to their door. That's the same thing the dealer can do, but making it a lot more convenient for sure.
Well, and, it takes 5 minutes for that little programmer to do its magic versus driving 3 hours back and forth, spending your time, and time is money.
Time is money.
OBD Genie, I really look forward to some of the things that they're going to be releasing. There's a lot of cool stuff that I've heard about, so that's super exciting.
A lot of the stuff that dealers can't do as well,
Oh, that's a good point.
There's a lot of things that the dealers can't do that you can either enable or disable, so... as that company grows, which has only been in existence here for just a few years, it's fascinating to see all the cool things that come out of there.
And I think that's super interesting. And not to take a detour from Infotainment.com, which, we were kind of up almost to current day, but to take a step back and go back to that, Infotainment.com, then really you were OEM Auto Parts and you turned into Infotainment.com. And then the advent of the Apple CarPlay and the Android Auto really just jettisoned your name out there. Because you guys were really the first to say, hey, how can we, just like with the radios, how can we kind of reverse engineer this or figure out what's the way to change this factory configuration to a better one you may have wanted but didn't roll off the lot with.
Exactly. So basically, what it really comes down to is time and perseverance. It's not like you can just, slap a radio in and plug it in and you're done. Yeah. It really comes down to pinouts and programming and fitment and what other parts do you have to replace in order to get it to work. So we'll do all that on our end, and once we have a marketable product, we'll put it out there and we'll do installation videos so just your average Joe can put it in.
And everything's a pre-programmed kit. Boom. There may be a little bit of stuff on the back end you have to, do and change in the regards of, resetting the vehicle's CAN bus. That's a detail sometimes people forget about. But the overall, it's factory OEM equipment that's pre-programmed for your vehicle.
Absolutely.
That's why I think it's definitely worth talking about. And on this first episode, as we kind of come a little bit to a close, I think we hit most of our points there that we were looking at.
Sure.
But I thought this would be super exciting to talk about. The Super Bowl is coming up. We're recording this podcast before the Super Bowl comes up.
Absolutely.
And we thought the people that listen to this first episode will get a super surprise.
Yes.
So do you want to tell us about this sale?
Yep.
What's going on?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So tell us what's going on for this weekend only at Infotainment.com.
Yep. So we're going to roll out our biggest sale ever, which is 15% off our retail price. Super 15 is going to be...
Super Flash 15.
Super Flash 15.
Super Flash, yes.
So what we're going to do is we're going to release that. That's going to be available Friday at midnight, I believe.
Wow.
Through Sunday at midnight.
Congratulations.
So we're going to
so that's a 2-day kind of a sale. And it's Super Flash 15 if you want to take advantage of that. It's from midnight on Saturday morning up until midnight on Sunday evening.
Midnight on Sunday, yep.
Yeah, so that is the very first ever Super Flash sale. 15% off for the consumers out there. Super Flash 15 is that code. This is Infotainment Talk Radio. We thank every one of you for joining us and helping us share this program. We're going to get about 5 or 10 of these episodes under our belts, talk with interesting people in the industry, fellow organizations that are out there doing great things on YouTube, and, of course, your calls, comments, and concerns and questions, most importantly. A lot of people will perceive that some of these upgrades to these safety features like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are software-based, but they're really hardware-based.
Yep.
So we go through that education, make sure you could talk about. So if you have questions, we will set up an email address for you. It's infotainmenttalkradio@infotainment.com. Get your email questions there, and next week we'll give you a telephone number where you can call and leave a voicemail if you want. But Doug, man, thanks for making some time to do this. I am Joel, and that is Doug over there, and we thank you listening wherever you're at, hopefully on your upgraded infotainment system in your vehicle.
There you go.
For joining us, and we'll see you. We'll see you on the other side. See you next week. Enjoy the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Go to infotainment.com.
Tonight